Hey there everybody, it's Mark Crowley. I'm back with another video. This is part 3 in my ongoing series of videos in which I do this entire illustration with no time lapse, letting you see every single step of the process, every second of the process really. Last week I added the color, the week before that was the initial pencils, and this week we're going to be adding the line work. So I'm going to just go ahead and jump in here. I am trying to keep each one of these videos to around 15 minutes, which means not laboring too long over any part of the process, but you know that it's nice to see a looser style sometimes. I've almost historically had a problem with drawing in too tight of a way, never really loosening it up. And last week I talked about David Small. That was one of the big messages he had for me was, Mark, you need to loosen up a little. All these super carefully controlled lines that you use are there's no life to them. So you're going to see me trying to give some life to these lines, and that generally means speed, spontaneity, not being completely in control all the time. Anyway, it is time to move on to the third of my 4 influences that I've chosen to talk about over the course of these 4 weeks. And this week I'm going to talk about Brad Bird, the great animator and director, writer, we should say as well, who kind of burst onto the scene with the Iron Giant back in the 90s, and then came to much greater prominence with The Incredibles, and continued on through Ratatouille. After that, I believe he did the live-action Mission Impossible, and then Tomorrowland, and finally his most recent was The Incredibles 2. And he definitely, little by little, became one of my most admired creative people. And happily, I think I did see his works in the proper order. I remember, unfortunately, a lot of us missed seeing The Iron Giant on the big screen when it first came out. We all should have run out to see that one because it's a masterpiece. It really is. Like many other people, I saw it on VHS, videotape back in the probably late 90s, somewhere in there. And was just astonished at how great the storytelling was. And that's my big thing with Brad Bird, although he's, of course, hugely talented in so many different areas, but the storytelling is what blows me away with Brad Bird, in terms of he just has such a natural instinct for how to present each scene in the most entertaining way possible, how to structure a story so that it really pulls you in and keeps you there. He understands how to get you to care about the main character, which is a crucial thing that a lot of people overlook. And I doubt that I'm anywhere near as good at it as he is. But when you watch a movie like The Incredibles, you care about those characters. He takes the time, especially at the beginning, to allow you to live in Bob Parr's shoes for a while, and Helen, and even the kids. He's giving you that time to sympathize with them, get to know who they are, and to become familiar to you, so that when he gets to the action scenes later on, you already care about them, and so these action scenes work on you in a way that they wouldn't if you didn't care about them, if you weren't given that time to get to know them. So, back in the days of DVDs, I suppose we're still in the days of DVDs, but they seem to be fading away. They would have these commentary tracks, and you could listen to the director commentary. And I've listened a few different times to the commentary track on The Incredibles, and it's like a master class. You really just learn so much listening to Brad Bird, and he's talking to someone else there. I think it's probably a production person. about the creation of The Incredibles, and you really just sit back and learn from a master as you listen to him tell the behind-the-scenes stories of how it was created. But I'm just so in awe of his ability to tell a story, and I'm sure I've learned a lot from him in that regard. And it was all on display, even with that first movie, The Iron Giant, in which he kind of came up with this idea of like a boy and his dog, except the dog is this giant robot, and the animation skill of bringing life to that robot, while creating a design that you would think had limited emotional range, right? Because the eyes don't change that much, and the mouth is like this big metal, structure that just sort of moves up and down almost like a ventriloquist doll or something. But oh my goodness, the amount of emotion that he's able to get out of that character by way of body language. And I mean, you got to give some credit to the voice actor. Forgive me, I'm drawing a blank. Was it Vin Diesel who did the voice? Of course, it's very minimalist. You don't hear that robot character speak very often. But definitely a real triumph of character work to take this metal robotic character and make it so human. And you do, at the end of it, you're like almost brought to tears by this robot character in a way that I've almost never seen happen with that style of character. And the humor, his sense of humor is unrivaled. I think when Brad Bird goes for humor, he just nails it in a way that I've seen very few people do. One of them, well, I'll give two examples. One of them is when Hogarth, the main character in The Iron Giant, has to say a prayer at dinner, right? The mom says, here, you say the grace, and so he starts to say the grace, and as he's saying the grace, he's seeing the robot hand moving around in the living room or something, and suffice to say, it freaks him out, but he has to continue saying the prayer, and it's just so funny the way they do it, and he's like, oh God, you are so great, or whatever, and the way he came up with the basic joke of a kid who's trying to say it's supposed to be this solemn prayer before dinner, while he's freaking out about this secret that he's trying to hide from his mom. It's just one of the funniest things ever committed to film. The other one, and I think it was at this moment that I just almost said to myself, this guy is a genius, is in The Incredibles when Helen, Elastigirl, is moving through this series of spaces, and she's using her elastic powers to stretch from one place to the other, and then the doors close on her. And oh my goodness, it's just that whole sequence of events and how it so fully takes advantage of her stretching powers, and you're laughing, but you're amazed by what you're seeing. That's some of the most entertaining minutes of filmmaking that I've ever seen. And then that kind of applies for the entirety of Ratatouille. I think Ratatouille is just a true masterpiece, start to finish, and it's so artistic, and it's ostensibly about cooking, but I think it's about creative people in general. And you look at this rat, Remy, and I think he symbolizes artists and creative types, and that passion for doing that thing that you love. And it's such a pleasure to see how that movie unfolds. Now, I got to tell you, Pixar is great at so many things, but sometimes I feel like they let their movies down with the trailers. Some of the trailers are better than others. And I remember the trailer, it was maybe just a teaser trailer for Ratatouille. And I was like, boy, I don't know about this one, you know, because I just thought, talking animals, I've seen this a million times. And it is sort of funny to look back and think that I had my doubts about Ratatouille. You know, in a way, the whole story seems to have been built on a pun, right? The fact that the word ratatouille has the word rat in it, it does not bode well, right? You would sort of like, wait a minute, this, you started with a title and a pun, and then you built your story out from that. You know, it sort of seems like that's how they arrived at the idea. I'm not sure. But a lot of things about that, when I first heard about the story, I just had my doubts. I thought, boy, I don't know. But man, was I proven wrong. And I know that there is a film critic for the Chicago Tribune. I think his name is Michael Phillips. And on this podcast called Film Spotting, they would name their favorite movies of the year. And I remember for that year, he named Ratatouille for his favorite film of the entire year, going up against all the live action, all that stuff. When you know how it is with animated films, people tend to favor animated film or favor live action films as serious filmmaking. They tend to regard animation as kids filmmaking, and I know Brad Bird himself gets a little upset when people tend to think of animated films as kids' movies or as a medium of some kind, as if it can only be used for one type of storytelling. And he's like, it's not a genre, you know. Animated films. It's just a sort of form of delivering a story. It doesn't have to be a certain type of story. And I think in his own way, he proved that in movies like Ratatouille and the Incredibles. That those are, I suppose, technically or regarded by some people as family films, but I think they're just great films in general. And you know, Bob Parr's struggle is a middle-aged man's struggle. It's not a child's struggle, and he chose to put this middle-aged man at the heart of his story, and his wife as well, both of them struggling with middle-aged problems. And you would normally say, well, you can't do that in a family film. It's got to be from the kid's point of view. But he clearly persuaded them, no, this can be a family film, but still have grown-ups as the lead characters. And I'm so glad he did. I think that elevated what people expected from animated films. That one decision, I think, was key. And I do hope you've seen at least one or two of those movies, if not all three of them. I confess I haven't seen Tomorrowland. But I want to check that one out. But even his Mission Impossible film, I shouldn't say even, but that's a live action film, and so you would think that it might not play to his strengths, as we have seen him as such a great animator, but that film also has lots of great stuff, and there's the scene where they've created this contraption that creates the illusion of an empty hallway, whereas in fact it's just an illusion. They are in the hallway and they're, you know, committing their crimes or whatever, or, you know, their impossible mission, hiding behind this thing, and it's like working some of the time and then it's not working other times, and a marvelous sequence. It couldn't have been done by anyone but Brad Bird. So that really, I think that sequence alone, but of course the scene where, the whole sequence where Tom Cruise is climbing up the side of the building, is it the Burj Khalifa in Dubai? I hope I'm getting that right. Spectacular, one of the most spectacular sequences ever put on film. And can you imagine, as a first-time filmmaker, you know, first-time live-action filmmaker, trying to shoot a sequence like that? But he knocked it out of the park. And I think with that little word of praise, we can wind this one down because we're at another 15 minutes. I hope you've been enjoying this. I've certainly been enjoying the aspect of finally having something worthwhile to talk about as I complete this illustration. And thank you, those of you who have stuck with this series of videos. We got one more to go. I hope you will return to see part 4 next week as I add the final touches in mostly adding color. I would think at this stage, maybe a bit of gouache, a bit of my beloved white gouache. Why not? Life's too short not to live it up a little. And with that, I think it is time for me to lay down this pen. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. And I'll be back with another one real soon.